Good morning, and welcome to the Terry Leadership Speaker Series. My name is Ireland Welsher, and I'm a Senior Leadership Fellow with the Institute for Leadership Advancement, studying Management Information Systems and International Business. The Institute for Leadership Advancement in the Terry College of Business is an undergraduate certificate program that develops values-based, impact-driven leaders. ILA instills leadership capabilities, promotes self-development, and improves communication, teamwork, innovation, and adaptability in our ever-changing global environment. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing Ms. Pam Rogers. Ms. Rogers is an ELC Fellow at the Estee Lauder Companies and the President of Risk Choices, LLC. In her role, she brings a blend of strategic insights and analytical expertise to her work. Her specialties encompass strategic process reengineering, enterprise risk management, framework development, and the analysis of key risk drivers, enabling her to create tailored solutions to effectively managing risk across organizations. At Estee Lauder, Ms. Rogers has contributed significantly to global product safety and regulatory affairs, leading the automation and talent upskilling priority workstreams. As Executive Director of Enterprise Risk Management, she embedded risk conversations early in the organization, fostering a deeper understanding of critical risk and their implications. Prior to her work at Estee Lauder, Ms. Rogers' impressive career spans over 30 years in corporate risk management and consulting, working with numerous Fortune 500 companies. Her experience involves pivotal roles at organizations such as Weight Watchers International, where she implemented the company's first ever enterprise risk management program, as well as working with leading retailers like Target Corporations and Sears. Outside of her professional accomplishments, Ms. Rogers has received numerous accolades as her outstanding contributions as an alumnus. In 2021, she was awarded with Terry College's Distinguished Alumni Award and was recognized as the Risk Management and Insurance Outstanding Alumnus. Additionally, she has served as a mentor for the Risk and Insurance Management Society's New York chapter and was named one of the Business Insurance's leading 100 women, reflecting her commitment to excellence and leadership in the field. Ms. Rogers has a bachelor's degree in risk management insurance from the University of Georgia and a master's in business administration from the University of Michigan. We are thrilled by the unique opportunity to hear from Pam Rogers today. Please join me in welcoming today's speaker.
Thank you, Arlen, for that wonderful introduction. Good morning, everyone. My name is Taha Ali, and I'm a Leonard Leadership Scholar studying accounting. I'm excited to be facilitating today's discussion. Ms. Rogers, your experience brings so much wisdom and insight to the business industry. Thank you for joining us today. It's truly an honor to have you. Ms. Rogers, to get us started, you said in an interview you always knew from a young age that you really liked numbers. Your initial major here at UGA was accounting, and I may be a little biased, but I think accounting is a pretty cool major. You then changed your major to risk management. Tell me about the moment that led you to change your major.
Well, first of all, good morning, everyone. I'm so excited to be back on campus. I always love to come back to campus, so great to be here, and thank you for having me. It really was a moment. It was a day. I was an accounting major, and I still do love numbers, and I still do a lot of accounting in my role. But I knew there was this balance at that time of needing to work with people, because I love working with people. At that time, accountants did not really work so much with people. And I had to choose an elective. It was either religion, I probably shouldn't say this in the chapel, or insurance. And I decided insurance might serve me better once I graduated. So I took insurance as my elective, and one day they had a corporate risk manager come in and speak to us about what a day in his life was like. I changed my major the next day. I knew I'd found that combination of being able to work with numbers and being able to work with people. And it was the right choice for me, but I've never given up on accounting.
Well, I love to hear that. So you then have changed your major to risk management and then began interviewing in the risk management arena. Did you find that challenging as a female?
That's a great question. I don't know if interviewing was challenging, but the interviewers were challenging. Maybe that's the way to think about it. I was fortunate in that I had a summer internship between my junior and senior year in risk management, and then when I was getting ready to graduate, I think it was probably around January, I did 2 interviews with 2 companies and was fortunate to get offers from both. But the one that I took, about 10 minutes into the interview, the man who would become my boss's boss looked at me and said, "The interview's over and I would never hire you." I'm like, that doesn't sound right to me. And this is the reason, like as a child, I don't know if any of you have probably experienced this, probably not, because parents parent differently now, but let's just say I had hairbrushes broken over my behind because my mother would tell me to do something and I would never accept that as okay. So I guess I got that from that experience, and I was like, no, that's not okay. Like, this interview can't be over after 10 minutes. You have to explain to me why you wouldn't hire me. And so about 45 minutes later, we ended the interview, and then I ultimately ended up getting an offer and working at General Motors. So you just have to be a little tenacious, a little persistent, but it just wasn't logical. So my team knows today that if anything doesn't look logical, I'm probably going to question it. So maybe that's where it came from.
Yeah. You were the majorette princess of America. You began twirling at the age of 5 and continued until 17. Tell me how that experience helped shape your future.
It's interesting because I actually used this when I was interviewing at Estee Lauder. And you think about your childhood experiences and you think, well, they don't matter in the work world, but they do. So when you're out interviewing for whatever your job's going to be, your first job, changing jobs within your own company, or moving to another company, they want to know who you are and why you're going to bring value to their organization. And what I could tell them about my competitive years, which have never ended, but those competitive years, was that I learned how to focus, I learned how to practice, right? And I learned how to do my homework. And then really important in corporate life, I learned how to win and to lose gracefully. And it's that ability to know that you cannot always get your way, but you can do that gracefully. Or if you do get your way in a corporate setting, you also have to do that gracefully, right? Because throughout your career, you're going to have that happen. And so twirling baton and competing, I would practice 8-10 hours a day in the summer preparing for national competition. And you learn to have this laser focus. So for my employers, I can tell them when we have some major situation we need to focus on, there's no one who will focus more and prepare more. I'm not the smartest person in the room by far, but no one will prepare more than I will for whatever it is we're working on and be able to focus on it and get a solution. And that's really beneficial to employers. So that's what I took away from twirling baton.
Yeah, I think that's really inspiring. Could you tell us a little bit more about your first ever leadership position?
Yes, but first can I just add on to one thing from that last question? I also got a tiara. Actually, a really big crown. So now when my boss and I are doing my performance reviews, he works remotely, I put it on. So then he has to feel bad if he has to say anything negative because I have a big crown on my head. Anyway, my first leadership experience. So I would say, how many risk management majors do we have? How many accounting majors? Okay, there's about 5 more that'll be risk management. Anyway, no, just kidding. I'm just joking. But risk management is all about leadership. And why do I say that? Because we are generally a small team in an organization, and it's our role to know what's going on everywhere in the organization and to influence others to do what we want. They don't work for us, but we want them to think about risk and weave risk thinking into what they do every day So we lead from the very day we start in that position, because that's what leadership is about. It's not about having a huge team of people that you manage. That's managing. It's about getting people that you don't actually control to go in the direction you want them to go, even though it may be a totally different direction than they're normally going. And that's what risk management's about. My first position really leading a risk management department was when I was, I guess, about 27, and I decided I would leave General Motors, which no one did. I would leave General Motors, and I would take a number one risk management position, and it was their first ever risk manager. It was a drugstore company, now it no longer exists. It's been acquired, and I would take on that number one role. And I say to students a lot, about 2 to 3 years out of school, most of you, if I've ever had any one-on-one time with you and you feel comfortable, you'll call me and you'll tell me how you should be the boss. Because you're the smartest one, you're smarter than your bosses, and therefore you should be the boss. And I'll usually say, give it about another year, and then you'll find out you're not really smarter than everybody. It just happens to all of us. But about 4 or 5 years into my career, I decided it was time to be a number one. And General Motors was not going to ever be able to give me that opportunity for many, many years. And so I chose to leave and go to Perry Drug Stores and lead their risk management department.
Yeah. What would you say you kind of learned from that experience?
I learned how to have a nice boss who I did something really bad and he didn't fire me. I really learned, so I was at General Motors. At that time, General Motors was the largest corporation in the world. General Motors is a very different company today. But so every day, we would round off the last 6 zeros on any number. Like you never talked about the last 6 zeros. So $1 million was $1. I went to retail drugstore where margins are very different and where every penny counts. It takes a lot of shampoo and Band-Aids to sell to make a profit. And we needed to do some work in our only distribution center because we stored automotive supplies as well as drugstore. And so we needed to spend a few $1 million. And I'm like, we just need to spend a few $1 million. You need to do it tomorrow. That didn't go over so well. So he pulled me in his office. He's like, you need to understand you work in a very different size environment and you work in a very different margin environment. And that was a huge lesson for me, and also a huge lesson in how when I've had teams to understand they can make a really big mistake like that and how to coach them out of it and not punish them for it. So that was a good lesson in leadership for both for me.
Yeah, I think it's really important to learn from your mistakes and view them as kind of learning opportunities rather than actual mistakes. You've said, I like to create order out of chaos, and once everything is in order, there are much better people to run a well-oiled ship. And that I'm the person who comes in and says, okay, what do we need to do to make this a well-oiled ship? I'm the fixer, I'm the problem solver, that is what I do best. What is the most unexpected problem or unusual risk that you've had to manage?
Can I give 2 examples?
Please
I'll
do.
be quick, I promise.
Please do.
So the first example is a business example. I spent about 10 years of my career consulting for others, and I had a client that was an electric car startup. And I'd never worked for a startup before. And every day out on the floor of this office space, the alleged CEO would come out and scream at everybody, which wasn't really very effective, but he did it and he sort of ruled that way. And I later learned that he actually had a federal conviction, so he couldn't really be the CEO. But by that time I learned that, one half of the board had sued the other half of the board, each one claiming the other was stealing money. So in the middle of the night, I get this call not to show up the next day at the office, but rather to show up at this other address. And I show up and it's an abandoned warehouse. No electricity, no furniture, and we would sit on the floor of that warehouse in the dirt and work. And then I'd have to be on phone calls with shareholders because, of course, they're suing each other. And then the second half of the day, I'd have to get in my car and go to the corporate headquarters and work there as if I never worked at the other place. So it was really chaotic and interesting. And my first experience to have the board suing each other. My job was to be their risk manager. And I had the wonderful opportunity in that to tell them there was no D&O insurance coverage because they were suing each other and there's no coverage. So that was a wonderful message to deliver. But that's the thing you learn also in leadership. You have to learn how to deliver tough messages. Right? My second example is more of a personal example in that the role that I'm in today, which is in R&D and global product stewardship, is in an area that I've never been in my career. I'm not a subject matter expert at all. And I work with fabulous PhD toxicologists and, people who have masters in regulatory affairs and really great subject matter experts. And to have to navigate, to move to that team, which I did on a stretch assignment, and then to join the team full time, and to prove that I could take my problem-solving skills into an area where I have no expertise and still be able to be successful at that is a great leadership challenge. It's just a personal leadership challenge. You suddenly move out of a career where, you're invited to speak at every conference. You're invited to do things like this, which is amazing. Suddenly you are no one. Right? You have no reputation. You're not in that industry at all. And to be able to do that and navigate that and feel good about it, it's difficult. But sometimes in your career, you're going to find you go up. And in this case, I took a lateral move. I did not take a promotion to do this. And then it set me on a course to go up again. And sometimes you're going to do that. And leading yourself through that is difficult. So when you face that and you have to make a decision and you say, am I going to take that challenge, recognize I'm going lateral, potentially even it could be one step down, it wasn't for me, and then be able to really soar? You can do it. You just have to really, again, be graceful about it, right? I was graceful about how I left my prior position in the company and how I took this one. At least I hope I was. I think I was. But it's a real leadership challenge to lead yourself through that. So leadership isn't always about other people. It's also about leading ourselves in a manner that we want to come out of it very well on the other side.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I know those are kind of hard things to navigate, and being able to do that with grace is such a great skill to have. Moving has become a massive part of your life, whether it be moving 20 times before landing here at UGA or through various companies during your career. Have you learned to adapt to different environments?
Maybe this is why I went in risk management too. I just find people interested. And everywhere in the world I've gone, whether I've lived there, I've traveled there, there are just such wonderful, interesting people everywhere. And so many of them are just waiting for someone to ask them their story. Just to give them the time of day to understand their story. And I've met some really famous people on flights and you think, I wouldn't want to speak to them. And you start talking to them and they're just the same way. They just want someone to hear their story and they're thrilled to share their story. So I think everywhere I've moved has been somewhat different, but I find wonderful people everywhere. And I think if you go in with the attitude that this is going to be a fun, positive adventure, you end up with a lot of positive adventure and you end up with some negative, but you just handle it. Everywhere has positive and negative, but the positive for me always outweighs the negative. So moving around, I found it fun. I had a sister and it wasn't good for her. So everybody's different. And there is no good or right or wrong about that. Some people can do it, other people cannot. It doesn't mean you don't thrive. It's just the way it's worked for me.
Yeah. I think that's a really great point that you bring up. And one of my favorite quotes is, you can't help but love someone once you know their story. And truly getting to the heart of people's stories is really important in today's world. You've had such an electric career working with companies from General Motors, NCR, Chiquita, Nestle, Estee Lauder, just to name a few. So you decided back in 2015 to begin your own company, Risk Choices LLC. What made you start that company?
I think a couple of things. One is I've always known I wanted to work with small and medium-sized companies. But small and medium-sized companies, generally speaking, cannot afford a full-time risk manager. So they don't hire one. And so I've always wanted to work with them and give them risk management services without them having to afford a full-time risk manager. And so that's what we do in Risk Choices, is we work with small and medium-sized companies to think about how do they manage risk, how can they manage it differently, do they need to buy insurance? Generally, they're buying too much insurance, so we try to help them save some cost on that. That was one reason I started it. And the other was, I know I've never wanted to retire, but large corporations at some point are going to say thank you very much for your service and decide that it's probably time, and it is time, to let a younger person take on a role, right? Every time we stay a really long time in a company, we fill a spot. And that is meaning someone else isn't going to get the opportunity to come in. And so I knew that when that time came, I would want to have something else to do. And so the time to start that is not once you are asked to retire. You have to get it going. You have to have a few clients. And so I've been very fortunate to have one client who's still with me and has been with me since I started. And then I've also gained other clients over time. And it's really fun to choose the clients that I have and work on my terms with those clients. And so I'll do that once I'm not working full-time in a big corporation, and see where it goes. I'm not looking to grow it to be a huge consulting company. I really like the size that it is, and maybe a little bit bigger, but not huge.
Yeah. So what would you say is kind of your vision for Risk Choices LLC, and what are some of the things that you are doing to achieve that?
So I think the vision is really my same vision as when I'm in a corporate role, enterprise risk management or risk management role, which is to help companies think differently about risk. So often in companies, they think of risk management as something else they need to do. It's a program. I have to do something else. Instead of thinking of risk management as just a way of working, right? And it's, by the way, not about minimizing risk all the time, okay? I always give the example, people will say, well, if you don't have any accidents, it's free. It's not free. It costs a lot of money to have very sound safety programs in organizations. It's very expensive. And you have to balance that. The company has to operate. If you really wanted no accidents, everything would be a robot and you wouldn't let one human in the doors. We're humans, we have accidents. So I want people to think differently about risk management and to have fun with the topic. Believe it or not, for those of you who are not risk management majors, you're missing out, because insurance is one of the most fun topics in the world, right? Everybody thinks that. I'm sure you all read your own auto policy. You'll read your homeowners, right? I'm just joking, but it really can be fun when you get people thinking differently. Usually when I'm with a large group, first question I'll ask is, how many in the room are risk managers? How many in this room already believe you're a risk manager? A couple of you, okay? How many of you decided to get out of bed this morning, get dressed, get here, and come to this event? I hope everybody's raising their hand. You're a risk manager. You could have rolled over in bed. You could have pulled the covers over your head. You could have not driven here or maybe walked across, some of the streets. Everything we do in life is about managing risk. We don't think about it in our personal lives because we just do it every day. But that's the skill set of a risk manager. Now we just take it to the corporate side. How do we operate every day? and manage risk, but we're not here to minimize risk. You minimize risk, you don't have a company. You optimize risk. So in risk choices, that's what I try to get my smaller size clients to think about, because they are afraid they'll have a catastrophic risk. But what's funny is they'll buy $1 million of insurance, but they won't pay for 10 million more because they want to take $1,000 deductible. So my job is to help them see you don't really have losses. If you have one that's 10,000, let's say it's 5 million and you take a 10,000 deductible, you're going to be $10,000 out, but you're going to be covered. Otherwise, you're not going to. So to help them understand those trade-offs and to understand the risk that they do and to understand how well they already manage their risk. So many companies do great risk management, but they worry about the things they think they're not managing. So they're really managing risk well in most companies.
Yeah, I think that's a really cool perspective to kind of have there. I know college students struggle with balancing their lives. How do you manage to achieve balance between running your own company, working with Estee Lauder, and having a personal life?
Well, everybody has their own balance. And this is one thing when you get into the work world, you'll really understand. We hear about work-life balance, and we often hear very vocally that should be a 50-50 or whatever. And if that's your balance, that is fantastic. That works for you. It works for your company. It's great. My balance is probably 95-5, work and personal. But that's my choice. Okay? I choose that. I love what I do. I love what I do in my corporate life. I love what I do in my consulting. And so to me, it's not, oh my gosh, I work so much. I do have a personal life. I do a lot of exercise, which my staff loves because it keeps me sane for when I'm working with them. We were talking about coffee before we came out, and I do drink coffee, but I exercise, and that is what releases the stress for me. So sometimes in the middle of the day, I'll go do like some HIIT training because if I don't, it might not be a good afternoon for everybody. So I do a lot of exercise, and I do quite a bit of not-for-profit work. And that brings me great joy, whether it's with students or whether it's with, I'm now working with the Georgia Women Give Executive Board, working with Wakami Foundation down in Guatemala. There's different not-for-profit work that I do, which brings me great joy. And so that gives me balance as well. I'm working with my sorority now on the House Corporation, which is an interesting new adventure I've never done before either. And so being able to do those types of things balances it out for me.
Could you tell us a little bit more about your not-for-profit work and kind of what's been your contribution to these various organizations that you're involved with?
Yeah, I mean, that's some of my greatest joys. So I was on Spencer Educational Foundation board for about 22 years. We give scholarships to students studying risk management, undergrad, grad, and PhD level. We do grants. We do summer internship grants. So working with students really since about like 1993, which I got into because I spoke at a conference and one of my fellow speakers said, you really should be working with the students. And so it kind of got me going, working with Spencer. I then ran the Anita Benedetti Student Involvement Program with our Risk and Insurance Management Society and began being a risk manager in residence, which is really great fun because I go on college campuses for 1, 2, 3 days and teach classes. So it's really fun to bring actual experience into some of the classrooms and to have a lot of fun with the students doing that. And then my more recent work, besides Georgia Women Give, is with Wakami, which is a foundation. It's actually a commercial enterprise, and they have a foundation in Guatemala where they help women who often do not have beyond second grade education build a business. And they make different goods. Most prominently is their jewelry, which is then marketed globally. And it allows these women to keep their children in school. So it ties back to the education. These children do not stay in school because it costs between $150 and $200 per year to keep a child in school. So last night I ate at the wonderful hotel I'm staying at and came more than halfway to doing a scholarship. I mean, and in New York, it's quite common that, a dinner will be between $100 and $150. For that, a child doesn't stay in school for a year and then they never go back. And so when you see these women who are learning, they've never had a checkbook. It's a very male machismo society, and the men are looked down on if the women work. So they don't have them work. So the women do it in secret. And then ultimately their husbands learn about it, but then they start to see the value it brings to the family, that the children stay in school, that the girls stay in school, that they get an education. And that's really what WCAMI is all about, is empowering women to improve the lives of their children and to keep their children being educated. And so that really clicked for me as far as the type of not-for-profit that I wanted to support. And so I do both work with them and support for them, and then also microloans with them. And so I'm not a person who comes up with the great ideas, but I love to support great ideas and people who have them. And so I've sort of found that to be my space with them.
Yeah, and I think that's really cool that you're kind of involved with all these great things. I've heard that fear of failure is one of the strongest learning inhibitors, and failure can be a tremendous opportunity for growth as well. Is there a moment in your career when you turned failure into opportunity?
Oh, let me see. Let me start to count. There are a lot of failures I've had. Again, when you take on new things and you're open to new opportunities, and you mentioned some of the companies I've been with. I've been with 14 companies in my career, and including consulting, where I had a lot of different clients. And when you are willing to take that on and that kind of change on, you're going to fail. Right? You're going to fail. So I think that if you think about the failures and how do you recover from them, probably one of my greatest, if you want to call it a failure, was my shortest tenure at any company, which was 7 weeks. Probably not the best resume builder, but I had interviewed with 2 companies. One company wasn't ready to hire. I was in the middle of a hostile takeover of my current employer. And so I took the job. It was a job that I had to move for. And I was there 7 weeks. And then, 5 weeks, I got the offer from the other company. And so it was a tough thing to go and tell them that I was leaving. They were generous enough to ask me to stay a few more weeks. But again, it's all about how you handle the time that you're in a role. So when you fail, people want to help you. Right? It's about treating people respectfully. It's about winning gracefully, which I had done in the 7 weeks I was there. And so when it was time for me to leave, which in some people's eyes would be a failure, they were actually quite supportive. They were very gracious about it, and really were kind enough to say, could you just stay a few more weeks, wrap a couple of things up, and then we're happy for you. So that's probably one of the failures in my career.
Yeah, and I think that's such a great kind of mindset to have when faced with failure. What advice do you have for the students in this room to set them ahead in the professional world?
Some of the things maybe I've talked about already, but I always say when you're out there interviewing, don't recite your resume. You got in the door because you're qualified. What that interviewer wants to know is whether when things get really chaotic, can they envision themselves next to you or across from you, getting them to the other side of chaos? Can they see you in that situation with them? So they want to know who you are. One of the greatest advices I was given, Weight Watchers, a bunch of us vice presidents in one day were all wiped out, okay? We were just gone. And so they were good, and they gave me outplacement service. And one of the things outplacement taught me was to really think about my story, my life story, and to come up with 2 or 3 stories that show an employer the value I'm going to bring to them, not because of my technical background. I know you're coming out of school, you don't have a lot of experience yet, but why is it they want to hire me over other people? So I would say that's one thing to think about when you're interviewing. Always think about the way that you are treating others around you. And that I give my father great credit for. From the time I was born, basically, I followed my father around in business, and it literally did not matter if it was the janitor or it was the CEO. He was equally respectful, always. And what's really interesting in a corporate setting is some of the people who can get you ahead are not at a high level, particularly executive assistants. They know their boss, and they know if they can get you in with their boss. So you sometimes think, well, I have to know the boss or the boss's boss, and that's how I'm going to get ahead. Your colleagues, today they're your colleague. Tomorrow they're your boss, or they move to another area in a more senior position. You want them to want you on their team. So whether it's your peer, 1, 2, 3 levels up in management, 1, 2 levels down, 5 levels down, it doesn't matter. It's important that you're respectful to everyone and you understand their story and how they matter. And then the other thing I would say is really listen. Like I say, people love to be listened to, right? Particularly in today's society. I'm not a social media person for a host of reasons. One, I don't really have the time to post, and I don't think anybody cares what I'm doing except my mom. She loves me, so she cares occasionally what I'm doing. But on social media, we sort of tend to get in our own lane, and then they keep us in our own lane, which is great. But we need to get outside our lane, and we need to connect with people. And so as you're progressing in your career, moving through your career, it really is about those connections that you have with people and genuine connections. When you move into leadership, and for those of you in ILA or who are, Leonard Scholars or Fellows or whatever, you learn management is very, very different than leading. Okay? You can control people when you manage them because they know you decide on what their, pay is and their bonus is and whether they get promoted. When you lead, it's very different. You have to get people to want to walk through fire for you, come out on the other side, and do it again. That's what leadership is. And when you can do that, then you know you're leading. People only do that if they trust you. Okay? And people trust you because you've heard them. I get teased a lot of times. There are fabulous leaders who keep everything up here at a high level. Their knowledge and they're great leaders. I'm not that kind of leader. I dive as low as I can go in the details. Because when I do, I hear people who are experts tell me what the details are. Then when I want to change what they're doing, they know I've heard them, they trust me to think differently, and they'll follow me on the journey and come out on the other end of that journey better off. I always hope I make them better leaders themselves. And so when you're thinking about how you handle your career, think about how important that is to listen to people, to get them to trust you, not to follow you because you decide what their pay is or what their promotion is, but because they trust you and they want to follow you. That's true leadership. And it's really a lot of fun, too.
Perfect. Well, finally, what is one thing you hope to be remembered for?
I hope that I'm remembered for bringing, added value to risk management as an industry and the companies that I've worked for. by what I've done, but also because of my work with students, because that's the future of the companies. You guys are the future of our industry and of companies in general. If I've done that and I've left a mark and I've improved things and added value, then I'm very happy being remembered for that.
Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Rogers, for your wisdom and insight and for sharing your experiences with us today. We now have time for one question from the audience. Yes, right there.
Hi, my name is Hannah Higbee, and I'm an ILA Leadership Fellow studying risk management. Ms. Rogers, being a successful businesswoman, did you face any obstacles, and how did you navigate them?
I never felt like I was discriminated against. And when I came into the risk management business, there really weren't women. If they were, I joined General Motors. We had 5 secretaries, that's what they were called at the time, and no female professionals. So they didn't really know how to tell me to dress. Really, it was very interesting to navigate that. But there were events at that time that I would get invited to and uninvited. And again, back to my childhood days, I never really accept that explanation. So I would go anyway. I remember being escorted in the side door, and me and 165 drunk men had dinner. That's an interesting thing to navigate. But I did it. And there were other things. There were trips that they would go on, and they're like, you can't go because it's all guys and you. I'm like, I'll pay for my own hotel room. It's really cool. It's okay. So I just always would go. I just never really, fortunately or unfortunately, take no for an answer.
Well, thank you so much for those inspiring words and for visiting with us today. On behalf of the Institute for Leadership Advancement and the Terry Leadership Speaker Series, we would like to present you with a small token of our appreciation and thank you for being with us today. Please join me in thanking Ms. Pam Rogers.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Also, we want to thank all of you for attending the Fall 2024 Terry Leadership Speaker Series. Please mark your calendars for our upcoming inaugural Shukri Leadership Speaker Series featuring Ted McMullen on Wednesday, January 15th, 2025. Again, thank you for being with us today.